Frogger, the lovable amphibian that stole everyone's heart in the 80s. A little frog trying to cross busy roads and rapidly moving rivers, you couldn't help but root for the little guy. Developed by Konami, yes, that Konami, and published by Sega, Frogger was released in arcades in 1981, and then later that year on the Atari 2600. Frogger was one of the best-selling games during the early 1980s, earning over $135 million in arcades. That's the equivalent of almost $500 million in 2025. And the home version sold around 4 million copies by the end of 1981. But by 1985, the franchise had all but fizzled out. It was not to be seen again. That is until 1998. And some executives said, "We need to send the Sega Genesis out with a bang." And then some other executive said, "I've got it. What about Frogger?" And thus, Frogger saw his long-awaited comeback. Okay, that's probably not at all how it went. Frogger technically already had a comeback a year earlier on the PlayStation and was maybe surprisingly one of the best-selling PlayStation games, selling over 3 million copies in North America alone. The PlayStation version was a completely new game. It was 3D, had larger, more complex maps, and new music. But we're not here to talk about the PlayStation version, we're here to talk about the Sega Genesis version. If you're somehow not familiar with the concept of the game Frogger, you control a frog whose only goal is to get across a busy road and then a river full of logs, turtles, alligators, and other obstacles in order to reach the empty spaces at the top of the screen. You have to do this 5 times per level, with each level ramping up in difficulty. As you progress, traffic gets heavier and moves faster, and the various obstacles in the river change as well. Sometimes you'll find alligators hiding out in one of the spaces at the top, so make sure to avoid those. I don't know if I've ever finished this game or if there's even an ending. It's a fun game, but it's one of those games where I can have a great time with it for about 10 minutes and then I'm good for a while. So how is it that an arcade game from 1981 made its way to the Sega Genesis in 1998? Well, let's not forget that the Sega Genesis was marketed as the console that let you play arcade hits at home. But Frogger feels a little dated compared to other arcade games that the Genesis was known for. With the rights of the original game recently going back to Konami, there's a lot of interest in bringing Frogger to current consoles. I use the word current loosely. By the time Frogger was released in 1998, Sega stopped manufacturing the Genesis console and had launched and retired an entirely new console in the Sega Saturn, and they were already in full development of the Dreamcast. Konami, striking a licensing deal with Hasbro, who in turn licensed the game to Majesco to handle the actual porting of the game, Konami's Frogger made its way to the Sega Genesis. Unlike the PlayStation version that was released a year earlier and the SNES version released the same year, the Genesis version was more or less a straight port of the 1981 arcade game, though it confusingly used the same box art as the PlayStation version. Majesco, who handled the port of Frogger, also licensed manufacturing of the Genesis console from Sega and re-released it as the Genesis 3, which was a smaller budget version of the Sega Genesis. Frogger would end up being the last game released by Majesco for the Genesis. Funnily enough, the SNES version, also released by Majesco, was the last North American release for the Super Nintendo. The Frogger franchise has been around for a long time and has seen many ports, sequels, and remakes throughout the years, but nothing really beats the original arcade version, and the Sega Genesis port is the best way to play that version of the game in my opinion. It's even made its way into pop culture, appearing in movies like Wreck-It Ralph and Pixels, TV shows like the infamous Seinfeld episode, which sees George trying to move a Frogger arcade cabinet across the street, much like a game of Frogger. Let me know what you think of the Frogger franchise. Did you play the original arcade game or the Sega Genesis port? And if you enjoyed this video, consider giving it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more videos like this, Make sure to hit that subscribe button and click the bell icon. That way you get notified whenever I post a new video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.